Hi everyone, welcome to episode 5 of Composer of the Month. This project focuses on showcasing the works of living and underrated composers. Today, I'm pleased to interview pianist and prize-winning composer Taige Wang. Notably, he was a finalist to the 2023 National Young Composers Challenge and winner of the Composer State Today competition in California. His piano trio Chopin vs. Chopin 2.0 was performed at Alice Tully Hall by Taige himself. He studies composition with Bruce Adolph. Hi, Taige, thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm very honored to be able to do this interview with you.
So let's go back to the very start of your compositional journey. What inspired you to become a composer, and who are some of your biggest influences?
Right, so when I started being a composer, it really wasn't anything too special. It's just um, my mom asked me if I wanted to be a composer. And well, it's really quite similar to how I started playing the piano. And yeah, she was really one of my biggest inspirations for so many things, and composing is one of them. And she's the main reason I started to write music. And also, it's just I was fortunate enough to be able to practice every day and look at sheet music every day. So many different pieces by so many different great composers, and I was slowly, like even if I didn't study it directly, I was exposed to all of the form, the structure, and the harmony. And I just thought that these things were all so amazing, even though I didn't really have the ability to analyze them yet. And well, one day my mom just suddenly asked, "Why don't you start composing since you're so interested in this?" And um, I was quite shocked, honestly, because I didn't know how I felt about like me composing, especially because I was only 10 back then. And yeah, I couldn't really imagine myself writing my own music. But then she said that if you write 3 measures per day for an entire year, then you will have written 1,095 measures per year. So that is actually quite a sustainable amount for any composer. And so it's really just she convinced me and she inspired me to start composing. And in the end, it was her amazing math that actually motivated me to start composing. Yeah.
That's really cool. And who are some of your biggest influences, you would say, as in composers and musicians?
Right. So, one of my biggest influences is actually my composition teacher, Bruce Adolph. I he has recorded many interviews and he also gives a lot of lectures that are on the internet. And I remember learning about him on YouTube and hearing his memoirs, which were all very, very interesting stories, and then also discovering his radio show called The Piano Puzzler, which is a very, very popular radio show that's very well known throughout the entire nation. And just I I always even before like way before he became my teacher, um, I was a big fan of his, and just so many of the things that he did and so many of the things that he talks about really inspired me. And before I entered the piano program at Juilliard, I was living in California actually, and I would always just search on YouTube or the internet because the internet is really an amazing place. It has so many different resources. Um, And I found so many different interviews of great pianists, living composers, and even documentaries of great composers of the past. And I came across an interview with Bruce on living the classical life, and that's how I became very interested in him. And I just continued to discover more and more about him. Every and even now, when I'm studying with him, every single time I go to visit him to have a lesson, I learn something new that I never knew about before, and I get a form of inspiration that I didn't have before. Yeah, it's really amazing.
Yeah, that's very inspiring. Um, And now let's move on to your compositional work. So how do you choose instruments or ensembles for a particular piece?
So far, I've only really chosen instruments that I'm more familiar with because notation is a very complicated matter that many instruments have a different form of it. And I I don't have enough knowledge of it to actually write for some external instruments. Like, for example, um, I read a story even with the greats called like with Tchaikovsky. Um, he would notate some harp parts that are unplayable because he didn't know enough about the harp to write a suitable part for them. And so the harpists would, in the performance, they improvise their own parts. So it's really a very complicated matter. And even if you know the notation, you have to know the instruments as well because their style of playing and everything, you have to write in a way that suits them and is actually playable because if not, then it's gonna get quite complicated. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, right now I'm really just sticking to the instruments that I know, and I would love to make more contacts with different musical instruments as I go. Yeah,
Would you
but right
say
now,
write more often for particular instruments or ensembles?
I'm sorry. Could you
Would
say
you
that
say
again?
you like to write for more like particular instruments, specific instruments or ensembles?
Um, well, to be honest, my knowledge of instruments of no notation of instruments isn't it is a little bit limited, but I do like to write for piano, of course,
Mhm.
because that's the instrument that I play. And there are many instruments, lovely instruments like violin, cello, clarinet, and also some brass instruments. But I think right now, there's aside from the piano, there's no really a specific instrument that I really like to write for. I'm trying to explore and learn as much as I can, but also I want to be aware of my own limitations and what I can write for because again, the parts should all be playable and there shouldn't be anything that shows that you don't understand what you're writing. So
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense.
thank
And
you.
moving on to performances, what are some notable premieres of your compositions?
So yeah, some notable premieres are, for example, of my piece Chopin versus Chopin 2.0. The title is it probably sounds very interesting, but um, yeah, so it was a piece that was commissioned by the Chamber Music Society. And then around April of 2023, we performed that piece in Alice Tully Hall, and had the opportunity to collaborate with two amazing musicians from the Calidor Quartet. It was such an amazing experience to be able to play with them, and they really were able to capture the essence of the piece so well. It was really wonderful, and yeah, so this piece, it's a very programmatic piece, and it's basically about this Chopin 2.0, which is an alien, and he basically goes back in time and meets Chopin, and then they start disagreeing with their styles of music, and then they start arguing, and then but then they realize that they have so much in common, and they start collaborating, but then um, well, the spaceship that Chopin 2.0 was in apparently had like an error or something, and it was about to explode, so they had to run away, and then in the end of the piece, they had to deal with being stuck with each other for now. It's a basically it's a it's quite an interesting story that I created, and I basically composed this piece based off of this story. And the story and the piece that I wrote it off was Chopin's Nocturne, Opus 9, number 3 in B major. It's very well known. Um, yeah, and that the two contrasting musical styles of Chopin and Chopin 2.0 I tried to depict in that piece, and when they were arguing, and also when they combined together, yeah, it was a very fun experience, and I was so fortunate to have been able to collaborate with great musicians in a great venue as well. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that was very something I'll remember for a long time, definitely.
So yeah, the story of the Chopin 2.0 is quite interesting. Did you think of it yourself?
I had some. I discussed it with my mother, of course, but yes, I did think of it myself. Yeah, if it were just a story, like I think the story itself is quite interesting, but it also needs a piece of music to back it for it to be really um notable, I think. Yeah. So
And so the next question is quite related to what I asked you before. How do you ensure effective communication with musicians performing your works?
well, I think for this question, everyone has a different method and everyone has a favorite method. So I'll just talk about it my own because that's the only one that I'm actually sure of. So first of all, when I compose, I try to mark everything very clearly, all the dynamics, all the tempos, and yes, and articulations, something like that. And secondly, I I try to write my intentions with the program notes. Like for example, the Chopin versus Chopin 2.0 piece. That piece was purely based off of a story. So I had to write a program note for the performers to be able to understand my intentions. Um, Other pieces like the NAN trio, the non-trio that I just composed, um, for clarinet, cello, and piano. That one I was inspired by New York and then Aspen when I went to the Aspen Music Festival. And there are two sections. Actually, there are three. So the first is like the busy and the liveliness in New York. The second section is the calm and serenity of Aspen, and then it goes back to New York, which is actually why it's called the NAN trio because it's basically the abbreviations of the cities. Yeah, and that piece it directly inspired by the places, but it wasn't a programmatic piece trying to tell the story of those places. However, I still decided to write a program notes about where these inspirations came from, and so that the performers and even the audience reading the program notes could maybe understand it or even relate to it even better. And lastly, when I rehearse with the performers, and I try to really just keep a relaxing and pleasant atmosphere and try to collaborate with them well. And so far, I've played all the piano parts myself. So for the chamber music. So in general, I've basically participated in all the rehearsals, which I think would be more efficient because after all, I did write the piano part and I did write the piece. So yeah, and for the other instruments, um the if the players have opinions of their own and if they want to um put that forward, then that's something that I would really gladly accept and I would love to um and I would love to based off of and change some things as well based off of the performers' opinions. And yeah, I just feel like I should let everyone rehearse in the rehearsal process have a sense of participation so that everyone feels included and that they like to work with me and play my piece of music.
I really like your approach. That sounds very interesting. So now moving on to how you work on new pieces. How do you stay inspired and motivated?
Um, that's it's a very difficult question to tackle, but I think for me, inspiration doesn't just happen when I wanted it. Unfortunately, I wish it did, but it doesn't. It's very unexpected. It's a very unexpected feeling, and that's why I always make sure to write it down or record it as soon as possible. And I think it's very important to accumulate all the materials that you think of and all the ideas that come to you. And when I really actually start to create, um, I try to think myself as a librarian searching through my catalogs of books that I recorded throughout time, throughout some time. And if I if I didn't get something fresh and new when I start composing, I can go back to my archive and get something from there. Yeah, and but how do I make inspiration or make ideas happen in my mind? I think I need to read a lot of books and listen to a lot of music and just watching movies, traveling, and just talking with people, talking with anyone. Those things can really help it happen because the secret is that you have to feel and just think about everything that you experience. And I think that's very helpful for ideas to come. That's how I approach it.
Yeah, I think that's very cool approach too. I usually enjoy, spending time in nature to help myself compose. And
Right,
I think lots of inspiration comes from other people's music too and literature. So yeah.
right. I agree. Yeah,
Well,
because
yeah,
I think everything, I just wanted to say like everything that um, every musical idea that we know and basically everything we know comes from something that was already done before. So we're not, I don't, it's very hard to invent something totally new now because of what's been already done. So I think everything that we compose and everything that we write comes from other people that have already done things. And we obviously try to elaborate and innovate more, but yeah, everything that we do comes from before. That's what I think.
yeah. And how do you hope your music impacts listeners when they listen to it?
Well, I think it's a very it's another very complicated question, and um I'm not sure, but it's I don't think music is essential for people to like live, but I do think that it is inevitable because from the beginning of the new universe, there has been varieties of sounds, and um, this is the music of nature, and music has been there, and it will always be there forever as long as something exists. And music actually, even if nothing exists, for example, if you take John Cage's 433, it's just silence. And yeah, because um a lot of composers' philosophy is that music doesn't have to be what everyone thinks music is. It's just sounds. That's what some composers think, and I think that's a very interesting approach to it. But anyways, I think music really cultivates people's sentiments and it enriches people's lives and it makes everyone feel better, whether it's a happy piece of music or it's a somber piece of music. It really pleases people's moods, and it's it gives us an indescribable spiritual power, really. And I think it really carries people's thoughts. And even during wartime, when life is not guaranteed, people still do enjoy music. And for example, um if you look at some of the historical events, like when they launched a spacecraft into the sky, they won't into the sky into space, they won't forget to carry CDs with good classical music on it. And yeah, if we're talking about how do I hope my music impacts listeners, um, I try to make not make I try to let people relate with my pieces, which is why I often write program notes, and I also try to write pieces based off of things that happen in everyday life. Like for example, I wrote a piece called Toothbrush Rhapsody Piano Trio. That's because yeah, I just tried to describe the scenarios of everyday life. Um, and that piece is about someone getting up in the morning and brushing their teeth and going to school after. So, and a bunch of different things happen in the middle of it. But I just really hope that the listener can relate and be curious when they see the title and ultimately when they listen to the music.
Yeah, I think that music is this sort of universal language that can be understood by everyone around. And so if you like have a particular idea that you want to show them of everyday life, then I think you are definitely capable of showing it. Yeah.
Thank you.
And my last question for you, it's kind of a fun question that I thought of. Can you share a memorable reaction or response to your music?
Um, yeah, I've been fortunate enough to perform my music as well. So there's many stories that I can tell, but I think for me, the most the reaction that impacted me the most and inspired me the most was when I composed a chamber piece called Tamano Ura. It was a piano quartet, and I dedicated this piece to a cellist who is also my previous chamber music teacher. And this work is actually based on a piece with the same name called Tamano Ura from the set Diversions for Two Clarinets by my chamber music teacher's late husband, who was a very fine pianist and composer. Um, Tamano Ura was recorded by very well-known clarinetists Larry Combs and Julie DeRoche from the Chicago Clarinet Trio. And Mr. Combs is my teacher's father, so and also the former principal clarinetist of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. So that there's a lot of connections there. And this the original piece was and also my work that I based off, it's a piece that comes from love and is about love. And I deliberately chose a quartet that includes both piano and cello because she is a cellist and her husband is a pianist. And I just hope that in the music their souls could sing together and interpret their deep love for each other even when they can't be together physically. And my teacher really loved this piece very, very much. And she first wrote a beautiful email to express her emotion. And we've also talked about it a lot in person. And um, I'll have the great opportunity to perform with her and other outstanding musicians in the June of 2025 at Westminster Press Presbyterian in West Hartford. So I'm very looking forward to that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. And I find the story with your teacher very sweet and heartwarming.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm very glad that she enjoyed the piece. So this is it for our interview, but I am so happy that you shared your experiences with us, and thank you for taking part in this interview.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.